Bouldering or top rope? Which do I start with? Which is more fun? Which is more dangerous? Let's find out. All right, so first thing, what is bouldering? Well, bouldering is essentially climbing without a rope. Now, we are using pads, especially in a gym. Some gyms will have moving pads. In this case, the more sophisticated gyms use these really thick pads that you can fall on. They're over a foot thick. Now, fun fact, in the old days, we actually had shredded tires to do this with. So this has gotten a lot safer. These new pads will save you from rolled ankles that we would get back in the day. All right, so let's talk gear. Now, bouldering is actually pretty straightforward in terms of gear because realistically, shoes, a lot of gyms rent shoes, so I decided to go with some high-end rentals today. And as far as shoes go, yeah, you can do it in street shoes, but I'm just generally going to recommend against it because just like running shoes, you could run in any shoes, but running shoes give you more function, climbing shoes give you more functionality. And there's a lot of people who have done videos on shoe selection, so I won't get into that too much right now. Just understand that climbing in street shoes can be a detriment to others at the gym because you're going to gunk up the holds, you're going to put a lot of stuff all over them, make a mess. So let's talk about chalk. Chalk is the other really important thing when you're bouldering. Now, chalk, obviously you can carry it in a bucket or something like that. And there's a lot of discussion about needing chalk. I know a lot of people who start off and they do it without, and that's cool. You don't have to use chalk, but if you want to be able to perform at your best, yes, you're going to need chalk. As for brands, I'm actually doing a video on different brands of chalk a little bit later, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I would just recommend whatever chalk that your gym sells is fine. And if they have multiple types of chalk, ask the staff. I'm sure they're going to have a good recommendation for you. Talk about the safety. Now, one of the things I really like about bouldering is it's pretty straightforward. There's no ropes to get tangled up in or anything like that. And as far as spotters go, inside of a gym, you're probably safe to not use a spotter and you'll be just fine. But that said, if you are coming with a friend, they can spot you your first time to make sure your neck doesn't hit or anything like that. But really make the effort to put attention onto what you are doing. So a really easy example here is just a simple how to fall. Falling really should be about bending your knees, trying to roll the fall. So if I fall like this, I crumple a little bit, or let's say I took a little bit more intense fall. Protecting my head, not letting my head hit the ground if possible. And other than that, most gyms will give you some training on bouldering, so you'll be just fine. So the most important thing I can say, obviously, we talk about go to zero or things like that, but in the words of EQ, attention. Pay attention to what you're doing. That's how you're gonna stay safe while bouldering. All right, so we're gonna talk about the pros and cons of bouldering. Now, the pros in bouldering, it's a faster setup time. You're gonna be ready to rock and roll and get on the wall. You're also gonna find yourself building technique faster because you are able to access more of the climb from the ground. You don't have to climb all the way up to each part every single time. You can project it. And lastly, bouldering builds strength really, really fast. So it's gonna get you a stronger space faster than you would see with top rope or auto belay system. Now, as far as the cons of bouldering, obviously it is more intense on the body, and there is a little bit higher injury risk because of that. You are falling, so if the fear of heights is your major concern, falling from these higher spaces can be a little bit tricky at the start, but it can also be an easy way to get comfortable with falling versus having to trust a rope when you're 60 feet off the ground. Here we're talking about top rope and auto belay systems. Now, I do have to make a note here that not every gym is going to have a top rope or auto belay system, so you should check their website or give them a call to confirm that they have that if that's the way you're looking to start. So let's talk about the necessary equipment, necessary things. Obviously, you're going to need a belay device, you're going to need a harness, you're going to need shoes, you're going to need chalk. Everything beyond that is kind of if you want it type deal. I like clipping my keys to the back. This is kind of out of the way for me, and I am pretty much ready to rock and roll. Now keep in mind, you don't need a belay device if you're only doing top rope systems or if you're having a staff belay at locations that offer that. So that can save you a little bit of money. If you are wondering about belay devices, I am a big fan of these tube style auto locking belay devices. They work really, really well. They're very smooth, very easy to put on. Top rope systems can be done with a single or double loop. The gym we're in today has a double loop, so it reduces weight for the belayer, so you don't necessarily get picked up. But watch out for that, because some gyms do use a single loop, or some will just have a set of quick draws at the top with a rope loop through it. That will pick up a smaller belayer on a fall at certain heights. Just something to keep in mind. All right, so auto belay systems are fairly similar. You're still clipping into the harness. The difference with auto belays is you cannot hold in most systems. So once you fall, you're going down. That's an advantage of top ropes. If you fall, you have a human belayer and they can hold you and you can project all the way to the top, which is a great way to learn the process. All right, whew, that was a good session. So let's talk about some quick tips for rope climbing. Now, because rope climbing has a little bit more than bouldering, I'm gonna have a few more tips. So my first two are actually functional tips. And the most important thing I can say to you is just breathe. A lot of people kind of get tight or they forget to breathe, and it can also be important to stop and rest. On walls like this that are 35, 45 feet, you don't necessarily need to rest on the climb, but it builds up good habits for sport climbing when you're actually talking about lead. I'll be talking about the sharp end of the rope in a later video. Now, that said, just keep in mind, breathing while you climb, controlling the breath, probably one of the most important things you can do. All right, so tip number two, just chill. I know it sounds a little silly, but the more you relax in your body, the more efficient you're gonna get. And especially early on, being efficient is the most important thing to building your endurance when you're doing something like top rope climbing. All right, now the next two tips are gear tips, and I wanna share these just because I think a lot of people just getting into it may not know all the resources that are available to you. So tip number one in the gear space, or tip number three, harness. Don't buy a harness online, try it in person, feel it out. The feel of your harness is much more important than the aesthetic. It's gonna have your life for the better part of its entire service life. Some of these last up to 5 years. So please, please, please choose your harness carefully. Ask for your local gym or ask your local retailer where you're buying the harness from for recommendations. They can get you started with your first harness. All right, tip number four, or tip number two in the gear section, is shoes. Now, shoes, technically they are the same as what you're doing with bouldering, and when you're just getting started, one pair of shoes is fine. You're gonna wear through them fast anyway. Just get something cheap that you can feel comfortable in. But when you're getting on ropes more seriously, I personally like a lace-up, at least for the kind of beginner to moderate space, because I can stand on holds a lot longer, things like that. Once you get into the advanced space, it's more bouldering, so bouldering shoes may serve you better, but you probably already knew that if you're in that space. All right, so let's summarize just for final takeaways and everything like that. So pros of top rope and auto belay climbing. They have a lower barrier for entry in terms of overall climbing ability. Most gyms you will find, you're gonna find your easier stuff on top ropes and on auto belays. The other thing you're gonna notice here is the technical skills are gonna be a little bit higher, endurance is a little bit higher. Power does become an issue more at higher levels of top rope and auto belay climbing, but at the lower levels, the emphasis is mostly gonna be on footwork and the technical process of climbing, as well as staying on the wall. Cons of top rope and auto belay. First is going to be obviously a belayer. If you're dealing with top rope, you need a belayer. You need somebody there to actually belay you, and that can be tricky for people just starting out. The other thing you have to keep in mind is that if you're dealing with auto belays like this one, well, most gyms only have a couple of those set up. The vast majority of this area is dedicated to top rope regular climbing. So you're gonna have a limited availability of what you can pick. And lastly, you've gotta keep in mind that top rope and auto belay are obviously more equipment intensive. So there's a higher barrier for entry in terms of cost. You're gonna have to get the harness and all the equipment I talked about earlier. So that's something to keep in mind. So hopefully this video has been valuable to you. Whichever style you're gonna try, try them both, honestly. Thank you so much for sticking around and watching. If you have any other ideas, throw them in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're gonna have a ton more videos coming about this and many other subjects. And I just want to thank you all for watching. I think it's about time we get to some climbing. I get on the wall myself. So, woo.